This is former Indiana basketball player Brian Evans, and you're listening to Indiana Sports Beat with Jim Coyle.
Today's guest is brought to you by Reynolds Family Dentistry of Sellersburg. You need $1 million smile for those championship photos, and that's exactly what you'll get with Reynolds Family Dentistry. Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat, coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios on this Monday, and now we are joined by one of my absolute favorites, I'd say the senior writer on this circuit for certain, Mike DeCourcy, joining us from the Sporting News, from the Big Ten Network, from Fox News. Michael, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, Jim. How are you?
Cannot complain. Me and Todd trying to keep things pinned down on this Monday in July, getting out of the heat, man. It was a hot one this weekend. Just trying to get by and hope everything's having fun. How's your summer going so far?
You know what's interesting is this whole pandemic thing. It feels like time, it goes a lot more slowly than ordinarily. It's hard to believe that it's only July for me. It feels like usually when I get through with the season, there's so many things to do, graduations, vacations, then July recruiting, things like that, and they all kind of fly at you, and then all of a sudden you turn around and it's Big Ten Media Day, and I'm sitting with Jim Coyle at the Hyatt in Chicago, and it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like the longest time. And so I'm thinking that in some ways this is like extending my life. I try to look at the bright side that in some ways that all this being basically homebound is making my life feel like it's going longer. So maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, I hope we get credit. I hope we certainly get credit for this time off, Mike. I was thinking that too. It's like kind of a wasted summer, and I hope we get credit for this as we go forward, as nothing has really gotten accomplished.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this weekend, baseball starting up, and then next weekend the hockey playoffs. The NBA is not far behind that. It'll be nice. We've had those of us who love soccer, and I am certainly one who really loves soccer. I've had plenty to deal with that, but I do miss the other sports as well, and I'm happy to see that they're getting back to playing soon, and hopeful the NFL can work out their issues and find a way to safely stage their season as well.
Yeah, I guess for us, college football is and remains a question. I know that the plan, of course, is to go forward. We've seen several teams begin workouts, Indiana one of them, but we also saw that Indiana was a team that had to stop those workouts after 6 positive tests. But it's there's no way that you can't expect to get that when after they had a 0 at first, but I don't know what the plan is to just work back into it, but it's definitely there, and it's going to be a part of college football this year.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen with college football either, and to an extent, some of this is going to be there's so much that's going to be placed on the players to follow the responsible guidelines. It appears, and I mean we don't have certainty on a lot of this, but it appears a good. And this is not connected necessarily to Indiana. I have no idea. But generally, it appears that a large portion of the continued persistence of the virus has to do with socializing among younger people. And I understand their desire to socialize at that age. But that, if you want to play a football season, and this is true for college kids, for NFL players, if you want to play a season and you are not, it's impossible to construct a bubble in the way that has been done for the NWSL, the Women's Soccer League, for Major League Soccer, for the NBA. It will be to an extent for the NHL. If you can't construct a bubble, then there's a lot of personal responsibility that goes on the individual athletes and coaches and trainers and other support personnel to keep themselves as much removed from circumstances that might lead to contacting the virus. And no one can be 100% certain about all of those. But if you put yourself into high-risk situations, then you're going to put the season, your team season or your personal season, at risk.
Yeah, and now we've got so many different things that have to be looked at by administrators, whether it's the safety for students and their coaches, and then we have to look at the aspect of fans. On the fans, of course, want to go. Of course, you want to have fans there. Of course, you need fans there. You need to make money. There's that fine line that has to be walked of making money, safety, this, that, and the other thing. There's a lot of things that are converging there for these decisions coming forth this fall.
Yeah, to me, the first priority, if you're going, is to try to figure out a way to stage the season safely. That's the first priority, because there's money in that. If that's your concern, there is money in that. At least at the Power 5 level and slightly below, there is money in that. And so if you want to stage a season, that's the first priority, is finding a way to make sure that the athletes and the trainers and the coaches and all the people who would come in contact with the athletes are as removed as possible from those situations where they might come in contact with the virus. That's the number one priority. Fans, I think, especially at the professional level, and are a lesser concern, because there is a lot of money in the television contracts there, as well as, like I said, at the Power 5 level. I mean, if you could tell them tomorrow that they could absolutely, somehow miraculously stage a season in which all the players and participants and officials, et cetera, would be 100% safe, but there's no way you could have a single fan, all of them would say, okay, we'll do this. I mean, that would be an acceptable outcome for them, because they would be able to keep their athletes safe, and they would still be able to attract the income that's available through television. Obviously, that's a dream scenario, but I'm just sort of trying to illustrate what the priority is. If you can assure that, it's not that fans would imperil that, but that you might create a separate problem by having too many fans, or fans bumping into one another. Those fans are not going to be tested and secured in the way that the athletes are. And the athletes and the participants are going to be, they're not going on the floor without knowing that they have been tested recently and they have passed those tests. But if you're going to be a ticket buyer, I don't think that they can manage to require that. So that creates another level of concern. And to an extent, if the Indy 500 comes off as planned, I mean, that's a concern for them. That could be a situation where the virus becomes an issue.
And something else, it's kind of a separate issue, but with it, I was thinking of, with all these games, like Indiana is scheduled to go to Wisconsin. They're scheduled to go to Ohio State, to Michigan, places where Indiana, a team like Indiana, has had heck playing all these years. This is going to be a different year. Indiana's a different team. Could this season be really unique in the fact of, if we had these games and there are no home crowds, does that, by common sense, tell you that home field advantage is taken away? Are we going to see some weird upsets this year if the season is played?
I think home field advantage is minimized. I haven't seen any recent numbers with the Bundesliga in Germany or the Premier League in England, but early on, I know that in the Bundesliga there were a lot more road victories than there ordinarily would be. So I think you can assume that there would be an impact on home field advantage, that the crowd noise would not be as disruptive. If there are any fans, it wouldn't be as disruptive. If there are no fans, it would be disruptive at all. So I think that's an issue, and I think those of us who follow it, and I'm sure Todd would have an idea on this. You feel like the fan noise and proximity in a basketball game, it's maybe had a little impact at times on officials and what their thought process is. If I make, it all happens fast, but there is that in the back of the mind. If I make this call, am I going to get out of here alive, so to speak? It's just a figure of speech, but that concept, I think that that goes away when there are no fans or minimal fans in the stands as well. So I think you're right that it does lend the possibility of road teams being more formidable than they ordinarily are.
And obviously no one's rooting for this pandemic and things like that. But honestly, it's got to be like a sports psychologist's dream to be able to analyze the numbers you're just talking about, more road victories, more road teams winning because of the fans not being there. I mean, just the analysis of it alone, it's not something you could ever even dream that could be possible. And it might be something that we're dealing with here in a few months. And it would be a really interesting stat. I love the sports psychology things and reading about them, and some of the different guys in golf sports psychology and some of the things they talk about. And I think this would be a huge not breakthrough, but just some interesting analytics as to what would come out of this if there are no fans in the stands when it comes to the road victories.
Todd, because we have years of data on what happens on home floors, on neutral floors.
Right.
And now we have this opportunity, if you want to call it that, to study what occurs in sporting events staged in what are basically empty gyms, whether it's like I said, the NWSL games. I've watched some of those played in Utah, where there are the only spectators are basically participants, bench players, coaches, trainers. There's really no one else there. MLS, I think they had like one spectator at one of their games. It was Greg Berhalter, the U.S. national team coach, and the rest is again the people who have to be involved in staging the game. And so you're getting this opportunity to see how athletes behave in those circumstances, and it does create another data point for those who follow sports and those who examine sports to consider.
Absolutely. I'm just wondering how the changes that are going to make for this single season and how that could hamper onto championships. I talked about the football thing, the football championships. Is that going to be altered in some way? It's just going to be a unique, weird year to get through this and see the changes, not just in the football, but even college basketball, women's sports in general. Are there going to be sports that are cut? We've seen schools that have cut sports, but a lot of times those were sports that were probably already on the chopping block.
I think that's an important distinction, Jim, and I do think that a lot of colleges that have cut sports, I mean, they are. You don't hear them saying, I really don't want to have to do this. Is there anybody else out there can help me? Can anybody write a check? You're not seeing that. They're just saying, no. Hey, this is our chance. I mean, to an extent, they're saying this is our chance. If we do this, no one's going to question it because this is all going on, and we know we're all taking financial hits, and they are. But when Stanford cut their sports, I mean, Stanford does not lack for money. And they got money they will never spend, but they chose to do it. And I think that I think it's been too easy for a lot of people who do what I do to just say, oh well, there you go. They can't handle it because of the pandemic. Look, this is not bothering. This is affecting Stanford, and it's bothering them to have had spring sports canceled in the sense that they have athletes that they wanted to have those experiences, etc. But it's not a huge impact on Stanford's bottom line to date. They did what they did because it was an opportunity to adjust their athletic program for the future. It's a reset. Cincinnati, I wrote about this in April, I think it was, when they cut men's soccer. Cincinnati's athletic department has always been a little not ideal in terms of the Title IX balance, and they had a men's soccer program that they weren't very good at. They literally, this is true, they drew 6,800 fans last year, and that's not an average, that's the total. I mean, they had no interest in it. They weren't that great at it. It was a chance to balance out their athletic department, and so they took it. And I don't blame them for that. I hope that in the future, those schools that do have to cut sports, I mean, I think we've seen some at the Mid-American Conference level and places like that. That's where the real financial pain of this is being felt. That's where it's really hurting. they're losing these guarantee games in football already. The Big Ten pulling into conference-only play, which is a logical choice and probably a necessary choice if they're going to be able to stage a season, but it does impact their opposition from outside the league. Those are the Mid-Americans and Mountain West and people like that. They're the ones that are really going to feel the pain of this, and ultimately some of their athletes will be affected.
Yeah, because their athletic budgets are basically set. A lot of these programs are set off of these football games that they go play. When they go play Indiana or Michigan or Ohio State or LSU, and they get that big $900,000 payday, and they do that 3 times in a season, that's a major, major hit for these programs not to be pulling in this year.
Absolutely, and we'll see that extend to basketball more than likely. Most of the programs haven't made decisions about basketball yet because they're still trying to figure out what to do with football. The basketball decision is one that doesn't need to be made today, and so it's not. But there's an understanding in the basketball community that it's going to be unlikely that the big guarantees that are paid to mid and low major schools by the upper echelon probably won't happen this year because those would be significant chunks out of income that the bigger schools would be giving up. Usually, those are very profitable games for the big schools too, because they sell the tickets, popcorn, and all that kind of stuff. Won't be anybody more than likely to sell tickets to or popcorn, and so it's going to be harder for them to justify writing a $100,000 check to bring in Sam Houston State or whatever. So I think you'll see them, the basketball programs, also take a hit on these guaranteed losses.
We just had the TBT come to a close. Man, we were following Mo Creek and Remy Abels. They got so close with sideline cancer. But the Elam Ending, of course, a major, major part of that. And you had a piece that I agree with. I don't see the Elam Ending ever filtering into college basketball, but I think it's a great place for it in AAU basketball. But yeah, I don't see it making its way to college, Todd, and I think you agree with that.
Yeah, I read your piece, and obviously I couldn't agree with it more. College basketball is my favorite, sport to watch on TV, and I don't want anything changing with it. I think it's awesome, and I think it's great. I don't think it needs a change. However, I do think there's a place for the Elam Ending, and I think youth sports, specifically AAU, and I think even high school basketball, it would greatly benefit from the Elam Ending from the standpoint of it would eliminate a lot of, especially in AAU, would eliminate a lot of wasted time at the end of games. But more than anything, from my perspective, I think it would help the development of the game for the kids who are maybe not the 2 or 3 best players on the team. I mean, how many times do we see a kid in high school get to come in the game for the last 2 minutes, and all he does is come down and they dribble the ball around and dribble the clock out. And in this scenario with the Elam Ending in high school, the kids would have to come in. Let's say they already have a 25-point lead. The bench players are going to come in the game and get to play. They're going to have to score 8 points in order to finish that game out. And I can see the development of that, where that could possibly, help younger players in the game. But I'm with you 100%. If it comes into college basketball, it's going to break my heart.
Todd, the one thing I would say about, the high schools, a shot clock, I think, is a better solution for that because it's more in line with the way the rest of the game is played on a world level and in college and the NBA, et cetera. The high schools are the only holdout in that regard. And
totally agree.
I think with an Elam Ending, I do think that I think there's a very good chance that you wouldn't see that bench player get to play as much because in a big blowout would the coach trust the walk-ons, so to speak, the high school walk-ons, if you want to call it, deep reserves, whatever you call them. Would they trust them to score those last 7 or 8 points or whatever, or would they want their regulars out there to get it over with? I worry about that at that level. I do think that's one of the things I think about college as well. Is that that time when everybody's yelling at Tom Izzo to put in his son, or everybody has their favorite. Every school has their favorite walk-on. They start yelling for in a blowout, and I'm not sure you'd see that if the Elam Ending were in the college game. I'm a believer that college basketball is a magnificent sport as it is. I have heard and seen calls for this to be adopted by the colleges, and that's one of the reasons. I heard it after the NBA All-Star game. I've heard it after several editions of the tournament. And so I feel like as someone who loves the game and has a voice in the game, that I feel like it's necessary for me to defend it to an extent. And I know that upsets some people who don't think that who are bothered that I would have any opinion about it. I had people yell, "Who are you to be the guardian of the game?" Well, I'm someone who writes and talks about the game for a living, and who's followed it for 40 years. Well, who's written about it for 40 years, who's followed it for 50, and I feel very invested in trying to keep the game, the great game that I've fallen in love with, and that has been such a big part of my life for so long.
And I think you do a hell of a job at it. Enjoy reading it, and I hope you keep at it for another 50 years. But man, what you got coming up for the rest of your summer? You got any vacation coming? It's something fun.
We got baseball coming up this week. I'm going to do a couple of things about the Reds opening their season. I'm looking forward to that. I've got 2-3 basketball projects that I'm working on right now. One of them involving the Elam Ending and why I don't think it's necessary. And so I still have plenty to work on. And I will find some time to take some time off at some point. But honestly, this circumstance, the pandemic circumstance, March went down. My workload in March went down by like 100% because usually I'm working at about 500% capacity during March. But every month since then has been about twice as busy as I ordinarily am at that time of year. So it's been fine. I've been safe and healthy, and I hope everybody who's listening is as well. And I recommend being smart and wearing masks, and maybe we can all get back to having college sports soon.
Could not agree with you more. Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News, the Big Ten Network, and the Fox Network, taking the time to join us as he always graciously does, and we greatly appreciate it, Mike. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, guys. Always a delight. Thank you.
This is Jim Coyle from Indiana Sports Beat with Coyle and Leary. Indiana Sports Beat is now a part of the Rivals Network. You can go to thehoosier.com to sign up. It's free. Catch the show there each day live or at your convenience. You can also like or follow us on Facebook, follow the show's rebroadcast anywhere you podcast. If we're not on a radio station where you live, we should be. Let your local station know they need to carry Indiana Sports Beat with Coyle and Leary, or simply go to thehoosier.com.